maybe we will begin with Prajanaparamita Hṛidaya Sutra read in Nepali, if possible.
Avak cinta vilapanam prajñāpāramitā majām anirodham nabhorupam swasam vijñāna gocharam pratyekaikasyatam vande trikala jinamataram. मैले यस्तो सुने एक समयमा भगवान राजगृहमा गृद्धकूट पर्वतमा ठूलो भिक्षु संघका साथमा र ठूलो बोधिसत्व संघका साथमा विहार गर्नुभएको थियो। त्यो बेलामा नै भगवान गम्भीर अवसम्बोध नाम गरेको समाधिमा प्रवेश गर्नुभयो। त्यही बेलामा आर्य अवलोकितेश्वर बोधिसत्व महासत्व गम्भीर प्रज्ञापारमितामा चर्या गर्दै रहँदा यसरी हेर्नुहुन्थ्यो कि 5 स्कन्धहरूलाई स्वभाव शून्य देख्नुहुन्थ्यो। अनि आयुष्मान सारिपुत्रले बुद्धको अनुभावले गर्दा आर्य अवलोकितेश्वर बोधिसत्वलाई यस्तो भन्नुभयो, जो कोही कुलपुत्रले यो गम्भीर प्रज्ञापारमितामा चर्या गर्न इच्छा गर्दछ भने उसले कसरी सिक्नु पर्दछ। यति भनेपछि आर्य अवलोकितेश्वर बोधिसत्व महासत्वले आयुष्मान सारिपुत्रलाई यस्तो भन्नुभयो, हे सारिपुत्र, जो कोही कुलपुत्र या कुलपुत्रीले यो गम्भीर प्रज्ञापारमितामा चर्या गर्न इच्छा गर्दछ उसले यसरी हेर्नु पर्दछ। ती 5 स्कन्धहरूलाई पनि स्वभाव शून्य देख्दछ। रूप शून्यता हो, शून्यता नै रूप हो। रूपभन्दा शून्यता बेग्लै होइन, शून्यताभन्दा रूप बेग्लै होइन। जुन रूप हो त्यही नै शून्यता हो, जुन शून्यता हो त्यही नै रूप हो। यसै गरी वेदना, संज्ञा, संस्कारहरू र विज्ञान पनि शून्यता नै हुन्। यस प्रकार हे सारिपुत्र, सम्पूर्ण धर्महरू शून्यता लक्षणवाला छन्। उत्पन्न नभएका, निरोध नभएका, मल नभएका, विमल पनि नभएका, कमी नभएका, सम्पूर्ण पनि नभएका छन्। त्यसकारण नै सारिपुत्र, शून्यतामा न रूप हुन्छ, न वेदना, न संज्ञा, न संस्कारहरू, न विज्ञान हुन्छन्। न चक्षु हुन्छ, न कान, न नाक, न जिब्रो, न शरीर, न मन हुन्छ। न रूप हुन्छ, न शब्द, न गन्ध, न रस, न स्पष्टव्य हुन्छ, न धर्महरू हुन्छन्। न चक्षु धातु हुन्छ र त्यहाँदेखि लिएर न मनोधातुसम्म केही हुन्छ। न धर्म धातु छ, न मनोविज्ञान धातु छ। न विद्या छ, न विद्याक्षय छ र यहाँदेखि लिएर न जरा मरणसम्म केही छ। न जरा मरणको क्षय नै छ। न दुःख समुदय निरोध र मार्गहरू छन्। न ज्ञान छ, न प्राप्ति छ, न अप्राप्ति नै छ। त्यसकारण हे सारिपुत्र, प्राप्ति नहुनुले गर्दा बोधिसत्वहरूको प्रज्ञापारमितालाई आश्रय गरेर चित्तको आवरण हट्दछ। चित्तको आवरण नभएपछि त्रासरहित भएर विपर्यासहरूलाई अतिक्रमण गरेर निर्वाणमा स्थित हुन्छन्। तिनै कालमा भएका सबै बुद्धहरू प्रज्ञापारमितालाई आश्रय बनाएर नै अनुत्तर सम्यक सम्बोधिमा अभिसम्बुद्ध भएका हुन्छन्। त्यसकारणले प्रज्ञापारमिताको महामन्त्रलाई जान्नुपर्छ। जुन अनुत्तर मन्त्र हो त्यो समानको अर्को कुनै पनि नभएको मन्त्र हो। सबै दुःखहरूलाई शान्त पार्ने मन्त्र हो। यो सत्य हो, मिथ्या नभएको हुनाले प्रज्ञापारमितामा बताइएको मन्त्र हो। जुन यस प्रकार छ, गते गते पार सङ्गते बोधि स्वाहा। गते गते पार सङ्गते बोधि स्वाहा। गते गते पार सङ्गते बोधि स्वाहा। यसरी सारिपुत्र, गम्भीर प्रज्ञापारमितामा चर्या गर्न बोधिसत्वले सिक्नु पर्दछ। अनि त भगवान त्यस समाधिबाट जागेर आर्य अवलोकितेश्वर बोधिसत्वलाई साधुवाद दिनुभयो। साधु साधु कुलपुत्र, त्यो ठिक हो, कुलपुत्र त्यो ठिक हो। गम्भीर प्रज्ञापारमितामा यसरी नै बोधिसत्वले सिक्नुपर्छ, जस्तो कि तिमीले निर्देश गर्यौ। तथागत अरहन्तहरूले अनुमोदन गर्नुहुन्छ। भगवानले यस्तो भन्नुभयो, उदात्त मन भएका आयुष्मान सारिपुत्र र आर्य अवलोकितेश्वर बोधिसत्व सहित त्यो सबै परिषद, देव, मनुष्य, असुर, गन्धर्व सहित लोकले भगवानले भनेको कुरालाई अभिनन्दन गरे।
Okay, so this is quite a deep and vast subject, and it's not going to be easy. Oh, I forgot that there's going to be translation for those who are not Chinese. They will have to bear with this, but probably this is also a good thing, because those who do wish to get into Prajnaparamita deeper, you might want to take note, and this gives you time to make notes. They are supposedly, in fact, they are supposedly, the teaching is so vast that what we have today, at least in the Tibetan translation, we have 100,000 verses, Prajnaparamita. About 12 volumes. Now this is, Tibetans and Indians are not so good with numbers, but this one is not an exaggeration. Then there's Niti, we call it, 20,000 verses, the collection of Prajnaparamita, 20,000 verses. And then there is also the 8,000 verses. And then the, Prajnaparamita, even those who don't really understand what is in the text, in the Mahayana countries such as China, Tibet, it's quite a big deal. There are traditions such as just to having the collection of books in the shrine. Sometimes lay people request monks to even do what we call a shalche, which is just flip through the pages, not even read, just flip through. Prajnaparamita is I would say, like a heart and the soul and the spine and the head of Mahayana Buddhism. But not just Mahayana Buddhism. Buddha said in the Prajanaparamita Sutra, which means those who want to achieve liberation of different categories such as Arhat or Bodhisattva, Yana, and so on and so forth, they all have to go through the Prajnaparamita. Basically, it's very important. In fact, Buddha said this is the only way. But of course, this time we are sort of just touching and discussing the Prajnaparamita Hṛidaya, which is the quintessential Prajnaparamita Sutra, which is only like 2-3 pages. And I insist, we are only going to sort of, we will try to just provoke some curiosity. That's all, I could do. When asked Davatagwa Chandakirti, to whom should we teach Prajnaparamita or the Shunyata? One would think, he would say, oh, Harvard graduated, or Campos. To them we should teach Prajnaparamita. But he didn't say that. He said Prajnaparamita should be taught, Shunyata should be taught to only those, by mere mentioning of the word Shunyata, they have goosebumps, they have tears in their eyes. Only to these people you should talk. There's also a story, once Manjushri discussed Prajnaparamita or the Shunyata. 500 arhats vomited warm blood, hot blood, and died. It's just not possible to accept. Let's see within these 5 days who's going to die. I, for one, I'm still alive, which means two things. I have mastered this completely, or I have no clue at all. Definitely the first one, I have to say this. Now, if you ask, who taught this? Then yes, Buddha. But when we say word taught, this needs to be discuss, because we are not on when we talk about, when we say he taught, not necessarily he used his lips and mouth or used language. Many times he taught in a totally opposite way, meaning not talking, not using lips. In fact, Prajanaparamita Hṛidaya, he was sitting, nothing, we will discuss this, but this is not coming from his mouth. And this has a very, very, very important, significant, we will discuss later, if I remember. Why was he not using his mouth? Why was his disciples discussing this? And why? And this is considered his teaching. This is a sutra, Prajnaparamita Hṛidaya Sutra, which is usually is supposedly the words of the Buddha. So why is it categorized as this? Why not Shastra? Anyway, as I said, Prajanaparamita is a very important for Buddhism, and historically also places like China hosted. China is one of the biggest hosts of Prajnaparamita tradition or the teaching. Of course, Japan, Korea, they also became vessel for Prajnaparamita for many centuries. And yes, of course, Tibet. In India, in the past, Prajnaparamita was a very important especially, made more important by guys like Nagarjuna and Asanga. Okay, you might want to ask, what's the benefit of this Prajnaparamita? Will it help us have good sleep? Yes, definitely. I'm not making it up. I'll quote. 대답에는 체답지 파르트 침빙하 릭바 침빙하 라나메빙하 미냠바다 냠바르 집빙하 능할탐지 랍도 시버르 집빙하, meaning yes, good for sleeping if you have an insomnia problem. Nepali translation, dungaltamji, all the dukkhas will, very good. Yes, it includes everything. Is it good for relationship? In case you are having a relationship problem, yes, it's good for this. Is it good for parenting? Absolutely. Should you be talking to your infants, babies, kindergarten students? Should you be talking to teenagers? Yes, this should be one of the subjects. Is this good for business? Oh my goodness, very much. I mean, even in the Indian tradition, Suresh, please correct me. There's something called, they say you need to have fun. Then in order to have fun, you need to have money, and you need to have a discipline. And finally, they say moksha. You need to know everything is illusion. These days, the fourth is what you don't hear from Harvard or Yale. They teach you how to have fun. What is fun? They teach you how to make money to have fun. They teach you how to have the discipline, thousands of books, but the last one they don't teach, that everything is an illusion. That they don't teach. This is why the business people, they suffer. Yes, so this is for happiness, this is for health, but they are all bonus. They are not the aim. I like quoting Chandrakirti, this one, again and again. What did Chandrakirti say? Chandrakirti said, the idiots do bad things and go to hell. Idiots idiots do good things and go to heaven. Idiots still. Only the wise ones go beyond good and bad and get liberation. So, this is so important. Is the aim to be happy and healthy and calm and peaceful? No. I have to insist this, because Buddhism is associated these days with happiness, very dangerous. I will protest wholeheartedly. It is not for happiness. Remember, idiots do good things and go to heaven. They are the idiots who want happiness. To be non-violent is not a Buddhist aim. I mean goal, ultimate goal. There are bonuses. This is so important before we even begin this. So for Buddhism, out of lack of choice of words, I will use the word liberation. Liberation is the goal. But the words like a liberation, nirvana, enlightenment is, they are so, I don't know, should I say overly used, or there's just so many, these words are used in so many ways. There's a nirvana hotel, there's a nirvana escort service, so on and so forth. We don't know. There's so much used. I mean, there are good reasons why it became like that, because of language, because of culture, and also because of capacity of people. So the liberation is heard and understood in many, many levels and different ways. Okay? For now, just for the sake of, this, how many days we are doing this? 5 days? 5 days, yeah. For this 5 days, but at least let's call liberation. When we say liberation, we are talking about, we are referring to realizing the truth. I think this will do for now. But we will discuss this later, okay? Okay, now, before we begin this, we need to prepare a few things. We need to prepare, or I don't know, how should I say? We need to have a sort of a mutual sort of understanding between, mutual understanding. So I'd like to prepare a few things here first. What I mean, what I mean by a certain phrase, language, words. Let's prepare a little bit. Well, we need to also sort of appreciate a little bit about how the Indians think. The Chinese and the Europeans, you'll have to sort of switch this a little bit. And also Indian way of constructing a logic, and especially Buddhist, that one we need to prepare a little bit. Otherwise, what I say, what you hear is never going to meet, okay? To do that, first you need to know what we in Tibetan call Tangden and Ngeden, these two categories. Buddha taught so many things. There are certain teachings that he taught, he actually didn't really mean it. I dare not say he was lying, but it's kind of, he didn't really mean it. Then there are certain teachings that he really meant it. Okay, but now, this is very, very complicated. This distinctions between whether he meant it or he didn't really mean it, there's a whole study going on. And this is a particularly, I was talking to you earlier about, how the Westerners and Chinese, they should sort of appreciate this a little bit, because I have a feeling that this is something, especially in the West, probably they don't have this way of thinking. I mean, yes, Cinderella and Alice in the Wonderland, mother don't really mean it, right? The mother, when she's telling a kid to put the kid to sleep, Cinderella and the Alice in the Wonderland, she didn't really mean it, but there is an aim. The mother need to put the kid to sleep. That is the goal. Because if the baby don't sleep, the mother gets stressed in the morning, and then whole thing falls apart. Stuff like that. So there is an aim. When the Western philosophers, which I don't know much, very little, but when the Western philosophers or the scientists, when they don't seem to have these distinctions, first and especially scientists, they don't talk about like, oh, they really don't mean it, or they really mean it. They don't say this. But one thing I need to say, the scientists, they never make decisions. They say, well, this is so far the finding, but we don't know next year. You understand? Whereas in Buddhism, it's already decided. Okay? There's no changes. Whether the Buddhas have come or not, the truth of the phenomena is unchanging. All compounded things are impermanent. All compounded things are impermanent before Siddhartha came. And all compounded things are going to be impermanent for, looks like, long time. Till somebody proves, no, one compounded things become permanent. It's contradictory. It doesn't. There is no such thing as a compounded phenomena and permanent. It doesn't. For the Buddhist mind, it doesn't work. Okay. Anyway, the teachings that require, really mean it or not really mean it. Is it? That's a big one in Buddhism. Okay. I will give you some list of Buddha's teachings that he did not really mean it. Okay? I'll give you. All the morality teachings are in the category of he didn't really mean it. Be a good boy, don't be a good but bad girl, all of this he didn't really mean it. Be generous, he did not really mean it. Be vegetarian, didn't really mean it. Johnny Walker is not good, he did not really mean it. This is going to upset some of you. I'm kind of afraid to even speak this out. Mindfulness. These days of Buddhism, mindfulness this, mindfulness that. Buddha didn't mean it. I'm sorry, but Buddha really did not mean it. Because if mindfulness is what Buddha really, really meant it, Buddhists will have forever constipation. Forever. Then another one. Love and compassion. He did not really mean it. I'm sorry, but he did not really mean it. Half of the bodhicitta also he did not really mean it. Now the next one, so important. I'll be really blacklisted after this. I will be blacklisted after this. But karma, he did not really mean it. Reincarnation, he did not really mean it. And then the biggest one, samsara, nirvana, he did not really mean it. Long after Buddha, one of his disciples, Shantadeva said in the Bodhicharya Avatara, Dunghal never hidendu drevi mongpa domija. He said, practitioners are allowed to keep one ignorance, time being. You understand? You are allowed to have one ignorance. And what is that? Thinking that there is an enlightenment. So, this is a very brief list. There's much more. Now, what are the teachings that he really meant it? One that we are supposedly going to be discussing for the next 5 days. As I said earlier, distinguishing between these two, what he really meant it or not, is very difficult. Because it also depends on the one who's doing the listening of the teaching. In fact, when we talk about the teaching, we are always talking about, listener. We are always talking about that. I'll give you a glimpse of, even though this is not the right time, I will give you a glimpse of another angle. I just want to give you this because, for people like me, Nepal is such a sacred land. It's a very sacred. It's supposedly Chakrasambhara Mandala. It's a tantric, it's a tantric world, so to speak. Now, just about a moment ago, I was saying, it really relies so much on who's listening. Okay, so if you read the life of the Buddha story, first thing after he achieved enlightenment, what did he say? Basically, he said, I have found a truth, that is brilliant, extremeless, peaceful, so on and so forth, but that no one is going to hear this. So therefore, I'm going to keep quiet in the forest. This is what he said. Ordinarily, you hear, oh, he doesn't want to teach, because, it's too, we will not be able to hear it. He's not going to teach. And then what? The ordinary story is the Brahma and the Indra came rushing and said, please teach, give him, conch and so on and so forth. That's the story. That's how the story goes. But from another angle, that was the most important teaching. Beyond words, you will not hear it. There's no words, there's no language. It's profound, brilliant, deep, vast, infinite, uncompounded truth. He was already introducing that right at the beginning. I mean, think of it. Isn't it brilliant? He did the two things in one go. When he said, oh, I'm not going to teach because nobody is going to hear it, from one angle, it's not what he really meant it. But on the other hand, he actually meant it. You know what I mean? The same phrase, both there, depending on who is hearing it. And then, anyway, the story goes like this. He went to Saranath, and there he taught Four Noble Truths. And for the common students, he taught about how the worldly life is full of suffering, and the truth of the suffering, and the cause of the suffering, which is the emotion, etc. But there were not just 5 monks listening to that teaching. There were many other listeners, many other listeners, and some of the listeners are very, very high-standard listeners, and they heard it in a different way. They heard that samsara is bliss, emotion is the wisdom. Okay, so between these two, we need to also discuss which one he really meant it, and I'm talking from the listener's point of view now. And this is really important. Now with this, we will begin with the text. Sutra always begins, thus have I heard, thus I have heard. If you like, you can call it a disclaimer. That's in a way, it's a disclaimer. You guys, after 5 days, you can't really say, oh, Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche said this. You only heard this way. Unfortunately, there's a recording machine, I know. But anyway, thus have I heard, meaning this is how I heard. It never begins with this is what Buddha said. And sutra is very, very specific. And then Ananda, here even we have a dispute actually. This, thus have I heard. Some people say this, thus I have heard. This I is Ananda. Others disagree. Bhava Viveka, one of the great Madhyamikan philosopher, he said that I, thus have I heard, that I is actually Vajrapani. And then some other Indian Panditas, they say that's actually Manjushri who is saying this. I just want to tell you this because, You need to know the culture of Buddhist teaching, so to speak. Majority of the Buddhists would agree with a great commentator of Prajnaparamita. His name is Singha Bhadra. He's really, really important. You know, he's a very important Prajnaparamita commentator. He says it's Ananda. Other specific, at Rajgir, a specific place, at one point. Already saying the Buddha have said different things at different audience and different places. This is important for the Buddhist students to know. You can call it, this is the richness of Buddhism. You can call it, this is what makes Buddhism so difficult and so, you know, like, what do you call it, just too vast. It would have been so easy if Buddha said, okay, all Buddhists, no chicken. Nothing to do with, you know, he really meant it or not meant it. No chicken. Go to Bodh Gaya once in a lifetime. Like that. All Buddhists must wear socks. Like this. Wouldn't be so easy. So easy. You can look at this. This is reflected to the Buddhist life also. Look at these monks and nuns. They shave their hair, you know, paranoidly. But then you go to, I don't see it today, usually Nepal is full of this, but anyway, probably in Bauda, there are yogis who have long hair. They shave their hair paranoidly. They're both Buddhist. One is really trying to shave, the other is really trying to keep. What is this? And then even Buddha's disciple, there's people like Ananda or Shariputra who look so serene, bare feet, begging bowl, shaved head, speaking very gently, you know, monk. And then there are people like Manjushri with the earring, necklace, you know, aftershave, everything. And some sort of almost inseparable boyfriend and girlfriend together. And we accept both. We proudly accept them. This diversity, the richness, which can be very rich but can be very confusing. That's Buddhism for you now. Okay, we will soon going to have a break, but before break, one more preparation. Language. This is a difficult one. If you know, for people like you and me, you know, what we are trying to do is really trying to, the final aim, remember, the liberation, the discovering the truth. How do we do that? For people like you and me, only is talking and listening, so needing to use the language. Unfortunately, that's the only way. If you happen to be like a Naropa and I happen to be like a Telopa, our shoes will do it. But unfortunately, we are not. Maybe you are, but I am not. Language is always vague. The language is vague. If it's not vague, the poetry people will not have a good job. And it's always changing, and also depending on different culture. For instance, I was, you know, like for instance, like Jane Austen. It's going to be difficult for a Tibetan Khenpo to read something like what Pride and Prejudice and make sense of what Mr. Bingley is talking about. Do you understand? I was just recently trying to read Balzac. Balzac is French, right? French. Balzac. And I was reading it in English. He must have wrote in French, English, and me, I'm reading it. So, like many of it, you know, I'm sure there's so many nuances that I am totally lost. When I was reading Balzac, one thing I thought, you know, there are certain things that the French do, things like, you know, stuff like that. I thought, this could have been also influenced by people like Balzac. Literature does have an effect on how you move your hand, I think. But what I really want to say is during the course of these 5 days, what Buddhists mean, ye, me, then, miden, like exist, non-exist, truth, not truth. All this, we have to pay some little bit of attention. Otherwise, it looks like some mad person wrote this Prajanaparamita. No eyes, no nose, no this, no that. But you can see there is, my nose is right here, my ear is right here. What's this? So, these are some of the preparation. Well, I think this is what you need to hear so that you will have a lesser assumption. Okay? So we will take a break now for like maybe 15 minutes.